Welcome to the FanDuel Punch-Out. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. Taking a look at the FanDuel main slate, and if you're coming over from DraftKings, the pod there, that only covers about 2, 315. Anything after there is not part of the main slate, so you didn't get the Coors, you don't get Kershaw. You do have all 15 games here, which is a different aspect to attacking this slate, and it's good because you can actually lock in Kershaw and move on to cash games. Because you're looking at some of these guys, Sale in a tougher matchup against KC, Strasburg in a tougher matchup, Price in a tougher matchup, Cueto at Coors. So Kershaw is kind of the easy number one to lock in there, 13-3. Not a bad price tag. Leaves you about 2,700 left over, but that's actually very doable on the slate. So very much in play. I do think Strasburg is an interesting GPP swerve because there is some strikeout upside there. 1,300 cheaper, so you got to like that. Lackey's a guy like at 9,800, getting a nice Phillies lineup there at home. Expecting him to be a decent favorite when that line comes out. Phillies 27th in WOBA, have a 21.5% strikeout rate, so yeah, I like that this year. Lackey's even improved his strikeout rate this season, sitting at 26%. Also missing some bats, 12.4% swinging strike rate. So overall, I think he's a favorable guy if you want to kind of spin down, especially more so in GPPs. I still think Kershaw is just the easy lock in cash games. Another guy who I do like, and I think it's a little bit riskier, but that's Nathan Eovaldi here at 8,100. Tropicana, solid pitcher's park, and you're looking at Eovaldi. I mean, his lefty struggles have been what's killed him in the past. And you look at Tampa, I mean, if he can work around guys like Logan Morrison, Brad Miller, and Corey Dickerson, Eovaldi should turn in a pretty favorable start. It's a pick 'em there. He has some strikeout upside just because Tampa strikes out a ton against righties, 26%. So I think it's a nice GPP swerve down. Another guy I'm looking at is Nick Tropiano. I like the price tag much more here on FanDuel. It's not quite as risky. 7,200 for that upside there as far as strikeouts taken on Houston, certainly playable. Houston, 25.8% strikeout rate, this 17th in WOBA. They're coming off another tough night where you expect them to do a little more against Jared Weaver, but didn't. Tropiano, 22% strikeout rate. The walk rate's a little high for me. It's in double digits, which is concerning, which is why he's only a GPP. He also doesn't work tremendously deep into games, about 5 or 6 on average. So Angels, small favorites. I think at this cheap price tag, you can really fit in some bats, and that it can pay off well. Moving to catcher, and this is a little bit different because you do have Buster Posey facing a lefty at Coors. That kind of stands as the top option behind the dish. It's an easy call for me there. Russin, 369 WOBA to left or to right-hand at bats with a 1.17 home runs per 9. Posey, obviously a notable lefty match. We've talked about him in the past, coming off a double dog game there in Coors yesterday. So expecting him to be in the lineup today and just kind of going strong as usual. If you do want to skate down to that next tier there, I don't mind Jonathan Lucroy. Getting the lefty, make sure he's in the lineup, just because he's had a run there of games and that he could be due for a day off. But if he doesn't, I think Wieters is a nice plug and play. So that 3,200 range isn't a bad option. The punt play Carlos Perez doesn't necessarily mean much as far as points per dollar because he's 2,900 now. So that's a little different. But if you look lower, I mean, you can take a look at Wellington Castillo getting lefty. I know Pomeranz is a tougher pitcher, but still getting lefty matchup. But Francisco Cervelli, 2,600 is who I'm really looking at down low. I love Cervelli. I like that price tag. 3.31 WOBA to right-hand at bats with Perez since 2014. Cervelli hits lefties well this season, 350 WOBA. 2,600 is a really nice price tag, and I like this Pirates team quite a bit. First base here, and I think this is one that's pretty simple. I mean, Ortiz is the top option. And also you do get some other names, but I mean, these guys aren't in great spots. I mean, Hosmer's facing Sale at 41. Cabrera facing Hill, who, yes, Cabrera's come on, he's been stellar of late, but still Rich Hill's been pretty good. You don't feel completely comfortable paying that price taking cash game. It's not a great ballpark either. Brandon Belt, lefty on lefty matchup. I don't hate it. I'm treating it more towards GPPs though. Goldschmidt, same GPP wise as well, getting the lefties. So Ortiz is kind of looking at in cash if you can pay up. It's tough though with Kershaw. A name to kind of look at is Joey Votto at 3,500. An easier matchup than Rizzo, who's just 200 more. He's getting Jimmy Nelson, also in Miller Park there, so you like that. He's had a strong series. I definitely don't mind him. Looking lower, I mean, there's not a lot. Logan Morrison's that guy I mentioned is one of the targets against Eovaldi, who's shown some big power numbers. A little bit boomer bust, but the way he's been playing of late, I definitely don't mind that. And outside that, I mean, you're kind of digging a little bit lower. Adam Lind, 2,600, the guy I'm looking at. I'm looking at some Seattle bats against Nolasco. That's one difference from DK to FanDuel. You're not going to have Nolasco to pick on. Lind, I mean, starting to pick it up here late. A 250 ISO in May, 330 WOBA. Nolasco, 374 allowed to lefties since 2014, 1.23 homers per nine. Lind's a cheap guy who I don't mind really in all formats if you need to save some spot, because a lot of those top price guys outside of Ortiz are in spots where you're not necessarily maybe looking at cash. Second base, it's kind of a similar story. You're liking Cano here with the mentions of Nolasco that I just talked about. 4,400 is a steep price tag, but definitely worth it if you're paying down at pitcher. I think this is a range where you can kind of stay pretty low, actually. I really like Josh Harrison at 3,100. He's hit lefties really well this season, and a solid Pittsburgh righty that I'm all over on today's slate. 3,100 is a really nice price tag. Harrison, 4.32 WOBA off lefties this season. Big 176 WRC plus. In that ballpark, I like him quite a bit. And I think he carries some pretty solid value. Going lower, I don't mind Gordon Beckham at 2,700. You can beat up on Tom Kohler quite a bit. Beckham's hit the ball pretty well this season. Certainly playable. But I'm looking at a lot of Milwaukee bats today in this slate. And that's Aaron Hill. He'll kind of transition us into third base here. But 2,500 is a reasonable option for him. Just kind of if you're paying down at the hot court, I think it could be a move to go. Also, you got Hernan Perez, 2,300. So you got your options as far as Milwaukee guys. You just got to check the lineup. I think Perez will slip at the top of the order, which makes him more favorable. Perez, I mean, some stolen base upside as well. You got that hit well against lefties. This season he's got a nice ISO over 200. So favorable play there. Sneaking on back up, Jung Ho Kang is a guy I like at 3,700. I think he's in a better spot than Kyle Seager just because of the ballpark there. King's got some big-time power. Has hit lefties well so far in the base, 359 WOBA, 235 ISO. I talked about Perez, much more average, so he's a pretty safe play. Matt Duffy is the guy who really stands out to me on FanDuel at 3,100. Yes, he's not a big lefty hitter guy. He's not like a Posey type or a Pence type where they're just mashing lefties, but a low strikeout rate. You're looking at Russ in 36.9 WOBA to right-handers. 3,100 is just way too hard to pass up as far as a Coors bat goes. But outside of that, I mean, Duffy is kind of the easy spin down option. I mean, I'm not really inclined with paying anything up with those prices of those guys. Just because Arenado's going up against Cueto, Bryant against Velasquez, it's kind of tough. Frazier, I mean, has hit the ball well against righties, shown some power. 4,100 against Volquez in KCs, that's something I'm all over. Donaldson against Price, 39. It's not a bad price tag, but definitely a GPP shot. So a lot of these top price guys aren't the best matchups for today's slate. Looking at shortstop here, and I think there's kind of two clear-cut options up top. That's Bogarts against Dickey, a great matchup there. Dickey hasn't been strong against righties. And Bogarts just continues to get on base and continues to chug out multi-hit games. So I think he's very playable. Jonathan Villar's price has come up. But overall, I mean, he's the guy I really like at shortstop here. And 457 WOBA off southpaws this year, 224 ISO, big strikeout rate. And we talked about the DK on the DK pod about that Reds bullpen. They are atrocious. So even if Finnegan only lasts 4 or 5 innings, you're getting another 4 of just awful pitching. So that's a big bump to a lot of these Milwaukee bats. Looking cheaper, I don't mind Brandon Crawford as far as the lefty-lefty matchup goes. He's shown some solid ISO numbers in the past against lefties. He would be a nice GPP play. Jordy Mercer, 2,800, so I like another lefty guy there from this Pirates side that hits lefties pretty well. So Mercer, 367 career WOBA off lefties, 157 ISO. I don't mind him as kind of a spin down option. Brad Miller, he's a guy who I like in GPPs just because you're targeting Eovaldi with lefties. If you're going that route, certainly playable there. As far as punt options go, there's not a lot I really like down low. I mean, I think you can kind of stick in that mid-range, and I don't feel you need to kind of stress salary elsewhere to the point where you need to punt at 2,200. Mercer's a solid option. Outfield there up top, I like McCutcheon at 44 to continue that trend of Pirates bats, but Braun at 42 is kind of where I'm looking. Really solid numbers against lefties this year. Looking at Finnegan, I mean, he's allowed a ton of homers to the right side, but Hunter Pence at 42 kind of takes a lot of steam just because he's a Coors bat against Russin. So certainly very playable. Coming down to kind of that mid-range, I like Jacoby Ellsbury at 3,600 and Cole Calhoun at 3,700. Odorizzi's allowing a ton of hard ball rate to lefties, 40%. The way Ellsbury's hitting the ball this year, or especially of late, he's come around 354 wob off right-handers. Certainly playable. I think he's more of a GPP move. I'd rather lean on Cole Calhoun in cash games. But Fister, I mean, 388 woba allowed to lefties this season, 1.86 home runs per 9. Cole Calhoun's kind of the only standout lefty that I really like at that price tag. If you're going lower, I mean, it's kind of tough. I mean, I don't mind Seth Smith as a kind of somewhat puntish option at 3K. Certainly playable against Nolasco there. Outside of that, I mean, you're looking at a lot of guys. If Chris Young is in the lineup at 2,900 for the Red Sox, I definitely don't mind him. One, because he's got some stolen base upside. You like righties more so against R.A. Dickey there, so that could be something to keep an eye on. Yasiel Puig started to come around of late, and I kind of like him at that price at 2,700. Cologne's not a guy who misses many bats, so it could be a way to get some cheap Dodger exposure against Cologne there. And really, I mean, that bat's not too expensive at all. In Dickerson, I mentioned on the DK pod, 2,600, so he carries a similar price tag. 344 woba off righties. He hasn't quite necessarily been himself, but still the ISO numbers are high at 315. And at that price tag, I don't think it's a reasonable ask for him to, to take a shot on him at all. That's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel Punch Out. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all the great tools and content.